You'd think that local media would be interested in a story about someone dying in the county jail. At least a little bit of interest. Surely they'd cover it. But I've noticed local media don't want to cover anything that makes local law enforcement look bad. Yet some of these news outlets cover incidents that involve me, and it's articles full of pure defamation in an effort to slander me. It doesn't make sense. They'd rather spread lies about me than cover something that's actually newsworthy, like an in-custody death. So I guess if they don't want to cover it, I'll cover it. The first in-custody death of this year was Adriana Cruz that happened back in February, but not a peep about it in the news media. We're going to dig deeper into the death of Adriana Cruz later on, because a lot of information on her death should come to light in the investigation of what we're talking about today. I've got limited information on this case, but I'm going to give you what I got for now. This is Donald Little from Lakeway, Texas. He was an attorney out of Austin. He lived in Erie County, which is one county over from Tom Green County, where I'm at. He got into a little bit of legal trouble here not too long ago, but that's not what this video is about. A little less than 2 weeks ago, he turned himself into Tom Green County Jail on October 27th. On November 4th, he was pronounced deceased. The first 4 days, he was in cell M4B, and his final 3 days, he was in M4B2 cell. I know this information from speaking with a inmate in M4B2 cell, and he told me they brought him in a wheelchair and had to pick him up out of the wheelchair and place him on his bunk. He tried speaking to Mr. Little, but there was no response. He was awake, but he wouldn't move and wasn't responding. He had dried, cracked mucus all over his face, and he didn't eat the final 3 days he was in the jail. This inmate and several other inmates were asking the jailers for help, saying he needed medical. The jailers let him lay there and die. I spoke to Mr. Little's brother, which is also an attorney, and he couldn't give me any specifics, but the autopsy shows troubling information. Mr. Little had been writing a book about the corruption in Tom Green County and San Angelo, and had gotten into it pretty bad with the sheriff of Tom Green County, Nick Hanna. I never met the guy, but I've heard nothing but bad about him. On October 27th, whenever Mr. Little turned himself into the Tom Green County Jail, before he turned himself in, him and a friend of his went out to eat. He had a beer. He was in good health, moving around on his own, just fine. So something happened to him at Tom Green County Jail. Here are some of the messages between me and the inmate that was in the same pod as him. This inmate talks about the blatant disregard for people's safety, health, and life by the jailers of Tom Green County Jail. Intentional, cruel, and unusual punishment. Officers allowing inmates to attack other inmates, and that's what the brother, and I agree with him, that's what we think happened here. Donald Little is probably beat by some inmates, and I think he died from internal injuries. But then they just moved him to another cell without helping him. That's the conclusion we were led to by judging by the last conversation that his wife and child had with him on October 30th on the phone. He couldn't talk at all. When they brought him in, he was in a wheelchair and had to be body lifted by the officers, his feet dragged behind him. Their cell had room time that day, but he tried talking to him, but there was no response, but he was awake. I came out to clean about 30 minutes later and tried to speak to him, and again got no response. Man had mucus, dried and crusted all over his lips. He didn't eat his first meal. Later on, he tells me he didn't eat any meals either. I notified officers and complained that he needed help. He couldn't even feed himself. For 2 days, I complained he needed help and needed it medical. 3 other inmates that was his neighbor tried to get him help. There's a good chance he died from hunger and dehydration. We witnessed him not eating anything for 3 days he was supposedly alive. Officers should always mark when someone doesn't eat. They didn't. Also, we have cameras in cells, so they completely ignored this man and his condition. He was murdered by officers, cruel and unusual punishment. There should be a second opinion / autopsy. And from what I was told, and it's very surprising, but his first autopsy showed some damning evidence for Tom Green County. I asked him if he is paralyzed, and he says he may have been able to stand, but I never seen him stand up. I'm saying maybe because another man claimed he was standing up at one time. Plus, he went from being on the bunk and to down in the floor. But he told me he couldn't talk, and he was in the floor for around 10 hours, if not more. But officers came and picked him up and put him on the bunk hours before the ambulance showed up to haul him off. All right, this inmate and me both have some of the same questions. Why hasn't the news outlets in Tom Green County covered this? I've reached out to several of them. The closest I got to getting a hold of one of them is they patched me through to a reporter, and I left a voicemail, but didn't hear back from them. The Tom Green County Sheriff's Office is currently in the middle of an investigation, mainly because the brother of this man is really pushing the issue. And he's a lawyer, and he knows how to go about it. So there's an internal investigation, but local news will not cover it. Donald Little's death should be put into the spotlight. Citizens of San Angelo and Tom Green County should be outraged that they haven't heard anything about this. And don't think for a second that this couldn't happen to you or one of your loved ones. This man had a successful career and he was not a criminal. So even though you may not have known Mr. Little, this could have happened to you or one of your loved ones, and you should be outraged by this. Outraged by the cover-up and the effort to sweep it under the rug without us finding out about it. Too many things get swept under the rug, and I'm not going to allow this one to get swept under the rug.